Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dead by Daylight podcast. So, we're going to try to do a weekly podcast where we talk about anything that has to do with Dead by Daylight. We're going to try our best to bring some insight to the world, to the fog. For our pilot episode, we're going to be talking about the very controversial perk, No One Escapes Death. All right, so No One Escapes Death. From a killer standpoint, I see how it can be utilized since there are so many survivors that gen rush, so it can be useful for that, and it can be used as a punishment to get rid of those survivors in the end game.
And I don't really play killer, so I'm mostly a survivor. From my standpoint, it's when you gen rush, it's kind of like a difficult thing to do because the killer, unless he's or she's focused on one person for far too long, that's our reward, is getting gens done while they're focused on one person. So that's how I see it, and not focusing on totems because you don't know about Noed until the very end, but it's always going through your head.
It really varies depending on a lot of things. First of all, it depends on what killer it is, because some killers have a lot more gen pressure than others. For example, if you had what's that perk called that blocks the generators?
The plague perk, or is it plague?
Yeah. Anyways, that perk will allow you to block off gens right off the bat, and it'll force the survivors to come to the closer gens at the beginning of the game. So that provides a lot of gen pressure right from the start. And then if you have a killer that is able to set traps like the Trapper or the Hag, you can place those around the hot spots where the gens are, and you'll be able to prevent survivors from getting off to a good start on those gens.
And for the killers who don't have that kind of like pressure like ability, there are perks that can combat that. Like I think it's discordance, where if it's two people
Right.
like on a gen,
The Legion perk.
yeah, there's perks like that help you around it.
I think from a survivor perspective, I understand why it's very infuriating to come across Noed. It's because sometimes it takes a really long time to get these gens done, especially if the killer, again, has good gen pressure. And getting to that exit gate is like the reward for all the hard work that you've done throughout the whole game. Sometimes these games take upwards of 20 and 30 minutes depending on the play style of the killer. And for them to have Noed and just decimate that kind of like dream or vision that you have of escaping, I understand where that frustration comes from. But in that sense, it's also a requirement, not a requirement, but it's expected that the survivors spend the time to go look for those totems throughout the map.
And for the survivors and the totems, there are like reasons to get the totems. Besides, like, you get 1,000 blood points per totem, which is pretty good, and perks like Inner Strength and Detective's Hunch. So Inner Strength, you have to get a totem, and then if you sit in a locker for 8 seconds at level 3, I think, you immediately heal yourself. And that's a reward right there. And then there's also things that are on the killer side, like Haunted Grounds, that kind of pressure you because you have to make a choice as quick as possible, because the killer could know where you are. If he knows where his Noed totem is, then sometimes they tend to hover around it to make sure that no one's on it. But if there's Haunted Grounds involved, which has 2 or 3 totems that are lit, then you get exposed for 60 seconds. It's like heartbreaking to see that.
Yeah, with Haunted Grounds, they updated it so that it has 2 hex totems, and then once one gets cleansed, the other one becomes a dull totem. So the only problem with that from the killer's standpoint is that you don't know which totem is which. Like you can see the aura of the totems, but you don't know which one is Haunted Grounds and which one is Noed or which one is Devour Hope or whatever other hex totems you may have. That's why it's usually not a good idea to stack Haunted Grounds with other hex totems. Going off of the case of Inner Strength, it's immediately become a super popular survivor perk since its release. I personally prefer it over Self-Care since it doesn't take as much time. So let's say you get a totem right off the bat, right off spawn. You get that and your Inner Strength is ready. I've seen people, if you see another totem, you might tend to not cleanse it just to kind of like keep it in the back of your mind in case you have to use your Inner Strength and then come back for that totem to restart your Inner Strength, and that in the end game could leave uncleansed totems. So that's a problem with that. And then another problem is if there are survivors that are dedicated to going to find those totems. Let's say they just got out of a game where they were super mad about getting hit with Noed, and they go searching for every totem right off the bat. There's going to be a lot of time where that survivor is just running around in circles, not really contributing much, especially if they can't find the totems, which on sun maps they're very difficult to find. And there's even one totem right now on Larry's Institute that you can't cleanse at all, which is a serious issue in terms of game design right there.
Yeah, that totem always in the back of my mind when I'm on that map, because if you see it lit in the end game, you just know
there's nothing you can do about it if it becomes a hex totem, especially for Noed. I don't see a lot of people running Detective's Hunch, even though it's a really good perk. I had a build that had Inner Strength and Detective's Hunch, and if you stack those two together, it'll be perfect for not only finding totems, but it also helps you find chests if you need an item or the next gen that you might want to work on. This all stems from the idea of kind of how toxic the Dead by Daylight community is, but I don't think it has to be as toxic as it is. I know there's like a movement that I saw on Twitch today that was called the GLHF movement or something like that. It's like to be inclusive and to be a good sport in whatever video game you're playing. So it's good to see that there's a push for equal play and fair play, I should say. I just don't think the Dead by Daylight community has to be as toxic as it is. There's a lot of teabagging survivors, yeah. And I personally don't really teabag just because I don't like it when I'm playing as a killer and the survivors do that to me.
And like, it almost feels like, I mean, obviously it's not true, but it feels like the developers of the game have these things and they know it's going to be toxic, but like, what are you going to do? You can't really get rid of teabagging. You can't get rid of Noed. That's a popular perk, and it's
they're never going to take Noed out of the game. It's they use this as a defense for using Noed, or as an excuse, I guess, that it's part of the game. They say it's part of the game. So, and then it's just an endless cycle. You can't really win. I've played through this game long enough to see sways from people saying that it was survivor heavy and then people saying that it was killer heavy, and then you can't ever have really a perfectly balanced game, but it's up to the community to take steps to, you know, be respectful of each other and just try to have fun with the game.
Yeah, and another thing on that is there's survivor mains and then there's killer mains, and sometimes if you get a message, you'll see or if you send a message, you'll see killers saying survivors have like big egos, or the other way around, and it's
entitled survivors.
Yeah, it sucks to see that, because like both sides are fun and you should be able to enjoy what you want without getting hate about it.
I personally usually play killer just to farm blood points. I don't really play it to get to a good rank or to play it for anything really other than to get blood points and then throw those into my survivors. So in that case, I have a lot of leniency when it comes to the survivors. Like if there's a survivor left and somebody had disconnected earlier in the game, I'll let him or her just escape, just because you don't see that too often in the game. Even though that's not the way it's meant to be played, it's a nice thing to do, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so to wrap things up, no one escapes death is a perk that was introduced really early on in the game when the Hag came out, I'm pretty sure. And it's been super heavily debated since it came out, just because it's viewed as a crutch perk and only bad killers use it, all sorts of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's here to stay. And it's not going anywhere. So just remember to do your totems. Get them all done. Just take the time to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. You get 2 totems per game. That's an extra 2,000 blood points. It's good stuff.
So that'll be that for the Dead by Daylight podcast, episode 1. We're going to try to do this hopefully once a week. Thanks for tuning in to the Dead by Daylight podcast, episode 1. More episodes will be coming in the future, and hope you'll stick with us.
If you have any ideas, send them in.
Yeah, put them in the comments section, wherever this is. Be safe out there in the fog, and cleanse those totems.